to order and note that it is 5 o'clock, Thursday, September 28, 2023. This time I'll recognize staff to call the roll.
John Reese.
Here.
Jordan Ryland.
Here.
Rob Allen.
Here.
Wes Tripp.
Here.
Curtis Casevang.
Here.
Welcome to the September 2023 meeting of the Raleigh Historic Development Commission Certificate of Appropriateness Committee. My name is Wes Tripp. I'm chair of this committee. If you've not already done so, please come forward and sign the attendance roster up front. The agenda and staff reports are available online, and a handout on meeting procedure is also available. The Raleigh Historic Development Commission is a city council appointed body, and this committee consists of residents of historic districts, architects, intern architects, architectural consultants, and contractors, as well as attorneys and historians, urban planners, and historic preservationists. This time I will recognize my fellow staff members to introduce themselves, commission members, and then we'll get to staff. Start with Curtis and then go down the line.
Hey, I'm Curtis Casevang. I live in Oakwood. When I'm not here, I'm helping architects design theaters and concert halls, and I've been on the commission for a number of years.
Yes, and I'm Francis Raspberry. I'm an attorney with a Raleigh law firm. I'm not a member of the commission, but I am legal counsel to the Certificate of Appropriateness Committee.
And again, my name is Wes Tripp. I'm chair of the committee, and I'm a local attorney here in Raleigh.
I'm Rob Allen, work with a large architecture firm here locally, managing mostly commercial projects. I'm a Raleigh native and a resident of the Boylan Heights Historic District.
I'm Jordan Ryland, local architect and resident of Raleigh.
My name is John Reese. I am a resident of the Glenwood, Brooklyn neighborhood. I am a registered architect in the state of North Carolina, and I've been on the commission about 4 years now.
And at this time, I'll recognize staff and introduce themselves as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Colette Canane. I have been with the City of Raleigh for about 5.5 years, and I have a master's degree in historic preservation.
Good evening. My name is Erin Morton. I am also RHDC staff for about 3.5 years now with a master's in historic preservation.
All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve today's agenda. Any discussion or debate? Hearing none, the question for the committee's approval of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the July 27, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, the question for the committee's approval of the minutes of the July 27, 2023 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we are ready to move on. Nope, not yet. Staff, minor works. How many were there this past 2 months, I guess?
Yes, since July, we've approved 16 minor works.
All right. Now we are ready to move on to applications. Prior to the meeting, notice has been sent to property owners within 100 feet of the properties in question, legal ad placed, and signage posted at the site. Commission members received a copy of each application, staff reports, and were to have visited each property. Staff reports were made publicly available with today's agenda. State law provides that major work applications must be approved in an evidentiary hearing and that persons have an opportunity to address an application if they desire. Evidentiary hearings are conducted in a quasi-judicial format. During the hearing, we receive evidence to determine that proposed changes are not incongruous with the special character of the district or the historic property. The committee reviews this evidence against guidelines referenced in the city ordinance before issuing a certificate. Each application is heard in the same way as listed in the meeting procedure handout. The quasi-judicial format of the hearing requires that the committee be impartial. Written staff reports are evidence presented just as any other evidence and were made available to us, the applicants, and the public at the same time. If any committee member had reason to discuss the specific details of an application before today, we'll ask to be excused from hearing that application. There is no time limit on testimony, but repetition is discouraged. Because of the quasi-judicial format of the hearings, which is that the committee hears evidence and then judges whether the proposed change is not incongruous, we are required by North Carolina law to affirm or swear persons that speak before the commission and offer evidence. All speakers will be affirmed at the beginning of each case. And now at this time, I will swear in staff members who will be presenting for each application. I ask that you please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give on the matters on today's agenda is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
All right, first up is COA 0075-2023. This is 914 West South Street in the Boylan Heights Historic District. And I'll recognize staff for, well, first I'll ask my fellow commissioners if they have a reason they need to recuse themselves for this case. If so, please state that reason. Hearing none, then I'll proceed with staff presentation.
All right, this is case COA 75-2023 for 914 West South Street. The request is to remove an existing fence and construct a 6-foot rear fence with some additional landscaping and planting alterations listed here. This is a view of the house from the street, from South Street. There's some minor front yard plantings proposed to be switched out here, but the majority of the work is located in the rear. So this is the side pathway and the 2 existing fence lines along the east property line here. Looking into the rear yard, I should note that some of the work proposed, it's partially ongoing, so some of it is pictured here already, and some is not. Swinging around to the rear, just a view of what's happening in the back. The accessory structure in these pictures has already received COA approval, as a note. Looking toward the rear alley, around the accessory structure, overall rear site work, and views from the alley itself, rear yard, and the west property line as well. So a summary of staff concerns are, it appears that no rear yard lawn space is proposed in the landscaping plan. The mature heights of screen plantings, the extent of grading is currently unclear. The proposed use of mixed media for a pathway and the rear step, and some general material and specification details. And the applicant has a presentation when you're ready.
Yes, come on forward. Ask that you please state your name.
Emery Ball,
All right. Will anyone else be presenting on the matter, or just you?
just me.
All right. Ask you to please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And are you the property owner?
I am.
One of them?
One of them,
Great.
yes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. So I think the only thing we're responding to is really the use of river rock, the plantings, and the granite step. There is no, one of the things I did note in here is that it said it had been excavated or graded 10 to 12 inches down, which is not correct. There's maybe 4 inches of impacted sand siftings that were dug out from underneath the old patio. There's been no grading or excavation beyond that, so let's see. So the foundation area beyond in the back of the house, that's not a drainage ditch. That's just literally stone to keep the dirt from splashing up on the paint that we were going to top with river rock. So we're not following the numbered planting scheme to the letter. We're only proposing 2 trees at the time. Really don't want to detail the plants down to the plant, because if they don't have that plant when I go to the store, I intend to plant something else and continue planting my yard. Not making any grading changes between the accessory structure and the main house, and the side and rear stepping stone pathways are proposed are the same materials. So. Sorry, I'm going to have to reacquaint myself with everything. Yeah, this is what I was referencing earlier. 10 to 12 inches of soil was not removed from the rear yard, so I'm not sure where that came from. This is still basically the same grade beyond the retaining wall and the new structure. And that's about how much dirt was dug out, just maybe 3 to 4 inches of, not even dirt, it was actually siftings that were under the patio. We're not planning to excavate any further, just landscape at this point. Yeah, we're not raising the grade above the existing berm towards the fence. The fence is not being used to hold back earth, nor will it be when we replace it. This is just showing that the berm is actually not on the fence at this point. So, just responding to the planting plan was provided to show a general plan of plantings, and not all the areas we planted as part of the project. Only the beds outlined in the diagram. The remaining area will be clover and other non-grass steppables. So, yeah, the muhly grass is only 3 inches tall. Beautyberry may grow, may grow to be 4 feet. But there's no screening plantings beyond those two that are any. Actually, those are the only 2 tall plantings we've proposed at the time. So, for the front, yeah, that's in the front yard. So we found other evidence of mixed media walking paths in the neighborhood, and so we're presenting those. This one especially is a mixture of bricks and concrete pavers. So, and this is other evidence of basically river rock or decorative rock used in the neighborhood. And this is also a river rock installation that was approved in 2013 in a historic district. So yeah, we're intending to recycle the brick from some of our construction process, along with Mondo glass and clover and other step-up plants to do the walkways, along with rock if allowed. No deck plan. That was one of the concerns in there. The fire pit and grill are portable and not permanent. So, I don't know how to go back, but that's not mine. So, I don't have anything else. Oh no, now I'm not doing anything. Okay. All right. So I don't have anything else. Are there any questions or anything I can respond to?
Yep. Hold on just a second. Sure. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak in support of the application? Any members of the public who wish to speak in opposition to the case? Any members of the public with questions or comments on the application? All right. Now at this time, I'll recognize my commissioners for questions of the applicant.
I have several. The side yard, as I understood it, you were doing a grade change with a retaining. You're retaining the earth with the curb.
Well, that grade change, yeah, we can go back to that. That drop is pretty much already there. It's always been there. There's always been a big drop between the backyard and the side yard there. It's mostly acted as a runway for the water to take a good running, down my side yard and any plantings I have there. So in an attempt to slow that down some, and also because we had this nice historic curb that we got from when they tore all the granite curbs out of Raleigh, we put it there to create a step down so we could actually control the drainage and not just have a waterfall.
Okay. So that does change staff, isn't that what staff was talking about in the report? Was that grade change in that step down?
Yes, it's just a more formal vertical drop than a natural slope that was there.
Right.
So just noting the change.
Okay, thank you. And then what do you plan to, is the concrete block going to stay there?
I don't know. We actually responded to the idea that had been put in the notes that we build a wall or a partial wall to support the fence there. I'm rather not put that much money into it, but if I have to, I will. Otherwise, we were just going to have it be an earthen berm to keep the water from running off of our yard into our neighbor's yard, and into the drainage tile that we've set up along the side of the house.
Okay, so that does bring up the next question. Is you said the the fence wouldn't act as a retaining issue, but if you pile up dirt next to it, it is a retaining issue.
Not if I don't pile of dirt on it.
So you're going to mount?
Yeah,
you're
just
gonna-
like I showed in the picture. Yeah.
You're going to mount away from the fence?
Oh, I see. Okay. So you're creating okay, containing that way. And would that cover over, I guess, the concrete block scenario as well and let it connect the two? How does that work?
Yeah, that's the idea, is that we're going to mound that up and let that become earth and the concrete block. I don't know if I'll leave it there to support it or remove it. It kind of depends on what the soil looks like when I get to that part of the landscaping.
Uh-huh.
But it's not intended to leave the concrete block exposed, no.
Okay. In the front, you had, as I understood, you were proposing to remove the two. Is that still part of what you're doing, or you?
Yeah, that's in there, right? Yep.
Okay, and then replacing the one or adding the tree as well in the front.
Yeah, I guess the beauty berry, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, you said it was called a tree. I don't know if it was a bush or not. I didn't understand, and I think staff had a question about what that was as well, right?
And the height. I believe.
Yeah, the height.
The mature heights
height.
of all of the proposed plants, we would potentially need some clarification on.
Right. Yeah.
That's the same question for potential screen planting too. We just don't necessarily understand what the mature heights are proposed to be.
But by guideline, they can add a tree in the front yard. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
That was the question I had, was because in the description, it said any planting can't be any higher than this. And so I kept thinking, is that a tree as well? So that was my question. Can we talk a little bit about the paving issue? You said today, which is different than what I saw in the drawings, that you're going to use the kind of consistent material all the way along the side, and then that changes in the back?
No,
Oh,
it's the same thing in the back.
Okay, so what you're proposing in the back comes around and has the mixed media?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll come up over the curb
Okay.
and then continue.
In the pictures that you sent, how many of those images were on side yards versus just being in the backyard?
I can't remember off the top of my head. They're all backyards.
They're all backyards.
Yep.
Okay, so they can't be seen from the street necessarily.
Yep.
Okay. In this scenario, you would be able to see this from the street.
I very much doubt it from the street.
Okay.
It's a good elevation of 10 feet from the street to our front yard.
Okay.
So,
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the committee?
So if we can, we were looking at an image of the side yard, and I'm not sure who's controlling, but the fence, the taller fence that we see there, that will be replaced. That's proposed to be replaced.
yes, that's going to be replaced.
Okay.
But the gate on the front of it will be removed
Okay.
and not replaced.
Okay.
From me, just to confirm what I've heard you say today, the front yard plantings proposed are all under 42 inches. There are no screening plantings in the front yard, and the only thing higher than that is a tree, the serviceberry tree.
That's correct,
Right.
yes.
And I'm going down just the potential conditions. The staff comment on the fire pit and grill are irrelevant because they're portable temporary items. You've shown evidence of mixed media paths, and the paths we're talking about, the extent of them are the side of the house and the rear of the house,
Yes.
correct? And those were all my questions.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee?
The plantable, the steppable, walkable plants that you proposed, are they, I guess I'm kind of familiar with clover, but they'll be like grass-like.
Yeah, grass like Mondo grass and clover, I think, are the
Right.
two that we're looking
We're not
at.
talking like a fescue, but it'll be grass-like.
Yes.
Okay.
I do have one more. Just to kind of put this in the hopper, how do you feel about the idea of retaining some grass area in the backyard.
I'm not interested in having a grass yard. I'm willing to put clover and stuff in there. There's plenty of examples of yards, including the one right next to us. that
Just a
have
question.
No grass.
Always a question.
Selling my mower, not interested in keeping up grass.
Understand. I get that 100%. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, we'll close the evidentiary hearing and we'll move to committee discussion. You can have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I? Shall I?
I mean, I feel like we could put conditions on any of the concerns about heights for any of the plantings. I mean, they seemed like they
Yeah.
answered that. So
Yeah, I don't have any
I'm
issue
not
with that. The
concerned
only,
with
the
that.
only issue I have is the side yard pathway and a little bit understanding more about how that transition happens from the terrace, from that upper where the concrete block is.
It seemed to me like my understanding was they were trying to kind of like counter the water moving towards the
yeah, no,
neighbors
I get
by
that.
like
Yeah, that makes
essentially
sense
kind
to
of
me.
berming it to make a little bit of a swale.
Right.
So
Right.
to channel it.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is the images that he brought in from showing the variety of path we're all backyards, not side yards, and I think when we whether we can see it from the street or not, the issue is is it according to the guidelines. It's pretty clear about side yards versus front yards, backyards, and that kind of stuff.
Like which point in the guideline are you thinking of in particular?
Talk amongst yourselves for a second.
Well, and John, I'll go ahead and say, I mean, the proposed design of the path is considerably different than the precedents shown. There were like 1 to 2 materials, and then what was shown in the application
Correct.
is like,
Yes. Yeah. A
some
lot.
plants woven in. So that's something we need to think about.
Yeah, and when I looked at that initially, I thought, well, this is very much of a time. It's not a period to the house. But
Yeah.
then again, one of the things our guidelines say in their foundation is that you're not supposed to create a false history.
True.
So why not have something that, as long as it's not having an impact on one's sense of the character of the house or the adjacent neighborhood, why not go for something that is a little more current? We're allowing different non-historic materials on pathways in other ways. This is just a slightly more creative variant,
Yeah, I mean, the condition is that, or a potential condition is that walkway be constructed of a single material, and I guess like it's really a matter of perspective whether those other precedents were a single material, right? I mean, is it a single material if it's stone with like gaps in between and the grass is another material, or is it just stone, right?
Yeah.
Because some of this is like planning between the actual walkway, to me, is not a material, right? That's what would be there if there was no walkway. I don't know. But I hear you. I'm not sold on it having to be one.
Gotcha.
I mean, I can find several, I can read all these ones in 1.3 to kind of be,
Well, which one are you focusing on in particular?
retain and preserve 1.3.1, for example, 1.3.2. It's all about preserving the character of the gardens, terraces, all the kinds of things that you would kind of have around the perimeter of the house. But to your point, I agree. I think that, there's not one way to kind of address this. The only reason I want to kind of bring this up as discussion is that how does this impact and become precedent for other things. Now, I know that each case is individual and all that other stuff. I'm very clear about that. Very clear about that. At the same time, this is different.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, John, you're talking specifically about the grading along the property line?
No, I'm talking about the
path.
the pathway.
Okay.
The pathway,
Sorry.
little design and stuff.
Okay.
I think it's adorable. It's some, in the backyard and that kind of stuff. Again, how does it impact the neighborhood as a total whole in other cases as we move through, future?
Yeah. And the way I'm viewing this is almost like semi-hardscape. It's not cast in concrete.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's very changeable over time.
True.
And all the yards and
Yeah.
all the neighborhoods
Yeah.
respond to the time they're in.
Yeah.
So my inclination is to offer a lot more latitude
Yeah.
on things
Well,
like
and, and I think your point is so well taken, because here we are always talking about having additions be of their time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we ever consider, because plants are plants,
Yep.
and then they don't come in a variety of structures or colors or materials other than what they are.
Yeah, and I think I'd be having this would be a different conversation if we were talking about the primary path to the house.
Yeah, okay.
Which is establishing
True.
kind of character and
Yeah, I think that makes that
bones in
that
the
has. I
neighborhood.
mean, that's a very important point to make in terms of specific to this case.
yeah.
Other than that, I was very confused by this presentation. It left a lot to be desired in terms of being able to understand it.
Yeah.
It was more chaotic than it was helpful to get to where they were going with
I
it.
didn't
But I think the
come out with a lot of clarity either, but
Yeah.
the testimony
the testimony
put it
helped.
into
Yeah,
clear
kind of put
relief.
it back into perspective. That's all I have.
I'm happy to try and make a motion, but I'm thinking it's going to take some editing. Okay. Now, and the motion I'm about to make is understanding we have testimony that where there's going to be a berm at the side yard that'll deal with the fence contact question. So I'm not including that in there. But I move that based on the information contained in the application and presented during the public hearing, we approve the application with the following conditions. One, that any new post holes be dug manually and tree roots larger than 1-inch caliper that are encountered while digging shall receive a clean final cut using tools designed for the purpose, such as loppers. That at least 25% of the rear yard have a grass lawn, clover, or other fine textured ground covers. 3, that the seating area match the planting bed ground cover materials. 4, that no front yard plantings of mature height greater than 42 inches and no screen plantings of a mature height greater than 6 feet be installed, exclusive of trees.
Thank you.
6, that the rock aggregate be small to medium size, period. 7, the following material specifications be submitted to and approved by staff prior to the issuance of the blue card permit. Revised site plan, keyed planting plan with mature heights, revised walkway surface specifications. It sounded like there was some uncertainty where we're going there. Accessory structure deck specification, if it's a permanent site feature. 8, that the following materials and specifications be submitted to and approved by staff prior to installation. Revised rock aggregate specifications, and B, yard stepping stone entry step specifications.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Case Fang to approve the application subject to the stated conditions. Is there a second?
I have one friendly amendment, I think, and just correct me if I heard this correctly, but I think one of the potential conditions you said, number 3, was that the fire pit and seating areas must match the planting bed ground cover material. Is that the ground plane that they're sitting on?
I believe that is indeed the intent. I believe that's the intent.
Okay, okay. I just didn't know, because when it said that
Yeah.
the fire pit, grill, and seating areas, I'm thinking, well,
And I specifically excluded fire pit and grill from it since we heard that
Okay.
the report, they were temporary.
okay, so the seating areas, which is not the seats themselves, but the areas that they're sitting on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So no change to the motion as stated. Right?
I'm hearing.
How do we feel about a?
Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Any discussion or debate on the motion?
Yeah, how do we feel about a friendly amendment for the berm and its construction? I mean,
Just making it clear as a condition.
Yeah,
Do
'cause-
it, offer it,
yeah.
please.
maybe help me walk me through this, but
I think you could say, Jordan, that the berm be constructed in a way that it does not come into contact with the fence.
It does not
ex-
act as retaining, if there's no retaining
yeah,
to it.
and that it's not structural in nature.
Correct.
perfect.
Accepted.
Any further discussion or debate on the motion as amended?
Please do make sure that you amend the facts that were provided during the testimony to reflect the decision and conditions as well. So we're voting on the conditions of the decision, but the facts on the upper half of the report will be transferred into the findings of fact. So we'll need to make sure that those fully reflect all the new information you received tonight, so it's not contradictory.
And those findings would need to be stated orally, correct? On the record?
Raz?
Actually, during Catherine's absence, I'm going to be preparing the findings and conclusions. So I plan on listening, reviewing the video as I do this. So I think that as we prepare them and propose them to you and have them for you next month, it'll be clear that we have, the findings and conclusions will correspond with the testimony this evening as well.
That works for me.
All right, very well.
we're
Motion's
good?
been made. And,
Okay, we're good?
yeah, okay. I think so. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the application with the stated conditions. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. The decision will be official at next month's meeting when the minutes are approved and signed. Thank you very much. All right, next up is COA 95, 2023, 415 North Person Street. Property owner Joseph Nunnery. Is he here today? Yeah, come on forward. And anyone else will be presenting as well. All right, ask you please introduce yourself by stating your name.
Joe Nunnery.
All right, will you be presenting as well? All right. If both of you will be presenting, I'll just go ahead and ask you to raise your right hand. I'll go ahead and swear you in. Yeah, and Ms. Black, also please use the mic as well, just when you, so we get a clear record.
Darsha Black.
All right, thank you. All right, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And I'll recognize staff now for their presentation.
All right, thank you. This is case COA 95, 2023 for 415 North Person Street, which is in the Blunt Street Historic District. This request is after the fact, and it is for the construction of a 54-inch metal fence and the installation of screen plantings. And you can see here, the property is located mid-block on North Person Street, across the street from the Tucker House. So this is a view of the property from Person Street. And we'll take a short walk around it. This is a view from further south on Person Street, looking between the 411 North Person and 415 North Person. This is a view from the alley. If this property looks familiar to you, it is because a couple months ago, the house next door also appeared before you for a fence. This is a view from that rear alley, looking towards the Murphy School and the house adjacent, the northwest corner. And that's all I got for you.
At this time, we'll recognize the applicant for any presentation or statements you'd like to make about the application.
No, not really.
All right. All right.
I mean, other than, yeah, we constructed it I guess kind of got in a hurry, I didn't realize what was going on, put the fence in. And
We constructed it similar to the house that we had approved of. We live in Oakwood too, so
Yeah.
it's very similar to 225 Elm Street, which is our house.
So, I mean, I just tried to set it back off the property lines to give people, room and not crowd my neighbors and all that. And that's pretty much what I did. So,
And we had a lady that was moving in that had dogs, so we wanted to put the fence up quick.
All right, thank you. All right, any members of the public who wish to speak in support of the application? Any members of the public who wish to speak in opposition? Any members of the public with questions or comments on the application? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed with questions from the committee.
Quick one for staff. I see no proposed conditions or anything of the sort. Okay, no
I
concerns?
have nothing to offer you.
Okay.
Any further questions from the committee?
I was surprised that I didn't see, because I had the same question, it in a 42, I thought you'd pull in the 42-inch height thing.
This is in the rear yard, so
Well, then we are good to go.
Yes.
You all did a lovely job with this. It's really, I mean, it's very thoughtful. I mean, you did a fine job. Do you all live here, or do you own it? But you don't live in this house. Oh. Well, thank you for taking as much care with this place as you do your own, I suppose.
well, unfortunately, I probably bought the two worst houses in Oakwood, me and Darcy have, over the last.
Our Oakwood house and this house, they were both pretty scary.
Oh, don't even get into a battling axe with that. I'm sure that somebody's going to win.
Any further questions from the committee? All right, hearing none, we'll close the evidentiary hearing, move to committee discussion. You all can have a seat. Thank you.
We've heard everything I need to hear.
Would you like to make the motion?
I move that based on the application, the information obtained during the public hearing, we approve this application.
Second.
Motion's been made to approve the application and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. The decision will be official at next month's meeting when the minutes and orders is approved and signed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, COA 101-2023, 704 Northeast Street. This is in the Oakwood Historic District. Property owner and applicant Kenneth Bowers. Come forward, please, Mr. Bowers. Please state your name for the record, please.
Ken Bowers, 704 Northeast Street.
And you are the property owner?
I am.
All right, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great, thank you. Are any members of the committee who have an interest in this matter and would need to recuse themselves?
Nope.
All right, hearing none, we'll proceed with the staff presentation.
all right. So this is COA 101-2023 for 704 Northeast Street. It is in the Oakwood Historic District. The request is to remove 3 trees and prune trees. And you can see here it is on Northeast Street, close to the intersection with Pace. This is a view of the property from Northeast. And this is a view of the side yard. You can see the dead tree here and the pecan just behind. And this is some photos of that pecan tree in between the two houses. Here's a view looking back towards the trees from the rear yard. And again, looking back from the rear yard up the side yard. Staff concerns, no replacement trees were proposed to be planted. There was additional information provided in the application as to why that wasn't provided. And no arborist assessment was provided on the health of the pecan tree. And the applicant does also have a presentation.
All right, Mr. Bowers, you have the floor.
Sure, thank you. First, I'll start. I was able to dredge up an email from the arborist. It's not a full letter, but it does give an opinion that the pecan is an awfully large tree to have so close in between 2 closely spaced houses. So I've brought copies of that to enter into evidence. In terms of replacing a tree, I thought in my application I said we were amenable to putting an understory tree on the property. It's just that the lot's not very large. There's already 3 hard, mature elms in the backyard. And my neighbor to the south, Lynn Lyle, has some magnificent specimen trees on her property, which come over my property and provide a lot of canopy. So there's not a lot of room between the house, the existing trees, to put another large, tall shade tree. But we do think we could find room for an understory tree. So, this is the thing you've already seen where the site is. It's a downward sloping lot, so anything in the backyard is about 10 feet below the street level. This survey shows the tree locations. The three mature hardwoods in the back on the rear property line are elm trees. On the north property line is the dead tree, the pecan right next to it, and then the oak tree. I will say the pecan tree was probably over caliper when I bought the house in 2006. The oak tree is my fault. It looked cute when it was growing and then kind of got out of control and should have dealt with it earlier. And I also show the two big trees on the Lynn Lyle's property to the south, the river birch and the oak tree. So you could get some sort of context and kind of a rough shading of where those canopies currently hang over the yard. So the pruning, we had the arborist out to kind of look at some tree issues, make some recommendations to us. The pecan tree was not originally on the table when that arborist came out, which is why I didn't have the same report. The thing is that when I talked to my neighbor to the north and told them we were looking at removing a tree, they're like, "Oh, great, you're getting rid of that pecan." It's like, well, actually, no, but I'll consider doing that as well. So it was added to the application kind of towards the end of the process. So anyway, the river birch on the south side is a prune, a low-hanging branch that is over the roof of the house, and then the oak has a very low-hanging branch, which kind of has no leaves on it till the very end because it's so far down in the canopy, and it's a sort of express highway for squirrels to come onto my roof. They've assured me, the arborist, that removal of these branches will not compromise the health of these trees. I have no desire to compromise the health of these trees. They're both exceptional specimen trees. So the removal, the dead tree, I think is self-explanatory. I'm not going to talk much about the rationale for that. It's just a dead tree. The pecan tree, is healthy. It's a healthy tree. It's growing. I've had to prune branches off of my roof many times, and it's a big nuisance to my neighbor to the north. They would love to see it gone. It's a great tree. It's just in the wrong place. It's in between in our side yard, in between our two houses, and has continued to grow and get really large. The willow oak on the northern property line is a twin oak. I think that raises some issues according to one of the arborists, that it would be, as it matured, it would be more likely to break in a windstorm than a tree with a single trunk. And it's right on the fence. It's been growing into the fence and damaging the fence. The fence is still intact, but as it continues to grow and get bigger, the arborist would tell me this tree has the potential to get huge, and it's very close to both of the houses, so that it really doesn't have room to go into its full thing. So these are just some quick photos. They're in the application. This is sort of the low-hanging branch that would come off of the river birch. This is two views of the low-hanging branch that would come off of the oak tree as it relates to my back porch, which you guys approved a few years ago. Thank you. There's photos of the dead tree and the relationship to the pecan tree, which you've already seen. Here's some more shots of where the willow oak is in reference to my house and my neighbor's house. And this is a view from my neighbor's yard, and it shows the willow oak kind of growing into the back part of their house. This shows what would be lost from at least one point of the street. The willow oak is a lot less visible today because it's in the backyard a little bit further down and isn't as tall. This shows the distance. I've measured it with a tape measure, about 40 inches off of my house's foundation. And then this shows the pecan tree as it's seen from the street. So there would be a visual impact, obviously, from its removal, but there would still be plenty of trees in the vicinity after its removal. In fact, in this view, it's hard to even see my house because of the lushness of the vegetation that is obscuring it. And just another view of what the pecan and willow oak would look like from the street, so you can get a sense of what they would look like if they were removed. That maple that's in the street tree was a what's the program where they put a street tree in front of your house? Neighborwoods. It was a neighborwoods tree, installed shortly. I think it was pretty small when we bought the house. It has done really well and would be huge if not for the power company coming in and slicing a big V through it. So now the design guidelines are not very friendly to tree removals, to be frank about it. So removal of mature and healthy trees should only be considered for absolutely compelling reasons. So I recognize that. And then in the specific guidelines, trees are definitely thought as part of the landscape features, for a historic character of a district. And I think Oakwood, it's got oak in the name. It's a very green neighborhood. There's a lot of wonderful mature trees. In Oakwood, there's also been a number of trees that probably outlasted their health and have come down in storms and damaged property. But the tree, it's a very, definitely trees, big mature shade trees are a big part of the character of the Oakwood neighborhood today. And of course, you have this guideline that is not appropriate to remove healthy mature trees. So from the tree pruning standpoint, I don't see any conflict with this. There really won't be a major visual impact from the removal of these two limbs. Minimal impact to the canopy as visible from nearby streets and properties, no impact to the health. There's sort of, I'm phrasing it sort of a compelling reasons test. And I mean, I think the thing to recognize is that, while mature trees are a major part of the character of the city of Raleigh and the Oakwood district, in an urban environment, the trees have to be in the right place so that they can grow to their full canopy. They're not in conflict with the structures. It's a balance between the built environment and the natural environment. No one would advise anyone to put trees of this species and size in the location where they are. They were volunteers that have gotten very large over time. Of course, I recognize that in the pecan, that's probably 30 years worth of growth. The willow oak's probably about going on 20 years worth of growth. So, there is some investment there, but I just want to say we shouldn't be blinded to the status quo. If you wouldn't put a tree there, the fact that there's one there now should not necessarily be a compelling reason why it could not be removed. So, where they've been allowed to grow in a location, you're kind of stuck with a position. Do you continue to allow a tree of that size in an inappropriate location, or do you bite the bullet and remove it? We've been putting off dealing with this issue, but it's only getting more expensive as it languishes. So that's why I'm here today. The arborist's opinion on the willow oak is not appropriate to have a tree between these two homes reach a height of 40 to 60 feet and a spread of 20 to 30 feet. Well, that would definitely put the canopy well over the footprint of both of our houses. We also had another guy out who did some work, and he was the first one to flag, you should do something about this, potential hazard to your home and your neighbor's home. He notes that the double stem tree can become even more of a hazard because there's a point of failure where the stems come together. In terms of proposed mitigation, I'll highlight here that we think that the northeast corner is probably the appropriate place to maybe slot in an additional understory tree. We're reluctant to put it, I don't have a good picture of what the yard looks like, but there's basically grass and a perimeter planting area behind a retaining wall that wraps around the edge of the property. There's a rain garden. I can't put a tree in the rain garden. That's on the lowest part of the property, kind of in the shadow of that oak tree. And already the oak tree cast my backyard into almost perpetual darkness all summer, making it hard to sustain any grass, which is why I have a healthy patch of clover in my backyard, like Mr. Ball here from South Street is desirous of. So we are totally amenable to adding a tree to the back landscape as part of that mitigation, but we only think there's reasonably room for one. Otherwise, we would essentially have no lawn area at all. And the rain garden, of course, is part of, we've tried to move our yard in a more sustainable direction over the years. The rain garden is essentially capturing 80% of the runoff from the impervious on the property. I think there's one downspout that doesn't go there, although it goes there indirectly. And we have planted the whole yard with native plants. My yard is mostly clover with a smattering of fescue, and which has been very healthy. You can get clover seeds at bulk at Logan's if you've ever wondered where to get clover seeds. I've never seen it at Lowe's, but you can get them at Logan's, but they're going to go away for a tower. So anyway, so get them while you can. Anyway, that pretty much wraps it up, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowers. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak in support of the application? Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Anyone with questions or comments on the application? Hearing none, we'll proceed with committee questions of the applicant.
I don't have any questions. I do have some kudos and accommodations. So thank you for, this was a very, very, very thorough and well done presentation. I've never seen something so thorough and so professional over something so what I would call relatively small based on other issues that we've kind of dealt with in the past.
I used to represent clients in New Jersey as a consultant in front of quasi-judicial boards, and they're very strict up there about how they run their QJ procedures. So
You did a beautiful job.
Yes.
And
When
you've
you,
answered.
when you,
I
when you
had
mentioned
questions.
the compelling test, I was like, this guy's an attorney.
Well, I was actually thinking I had some questions, but in the presentation, you ended up answering them all. I'm glad to hear that you're amenable to adding that tree that understory tree in the back in the location. I think is fantastic.
Right, and just one quick thing, I did today do a little research on some native species, and my arborist thought that a dogwood or a redbud would probably be an excellent choice for
You
that.
might also consider a Carolina hornbeam.
Oh, thank you. I'm no tree expert, so I'm open to suggestions. Carolina hornbeam.
Yeah, is an option.
That'll be in the minutes. I will follow up on that.
But I also was going to say that I think our first presenter could have learned a thing or two from terms of how you presented this. You just did such a great job.
All right,
Thank you.
moving things along. Any questions from the committee?
Nope.
All right. This time we'll close the evidentiary hearing. You can have a seat. Thank you very much. We'll move to committee discussion. I think we've probably already discussed.
Yeah.
Are
Any further?
Are we going to propose the tree, or are we going to be fine without the understory tree?
The understory tree, based on staff's recommendation, makes sense to keep in there.
I'm happy to make a motion.
Sure.
Based on this evidentiary hearing, the information provided in the staff report, and the presentation today, I move that we approve this application with the following conditions. That the 365-day demolition delay not be imposed, and that one replacement understory tree be planted on the subject property.
Second.
All right. The motion's been made by Commissioner Reese, seconded by Commissioner Casefang to approve the application with the stated conditions. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, the question for the committee's approval of the application. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. The decision will be official at next month's meeting when the minutes and orders are approved and signed. Thank you. All right. Last but not least, COA 103-2023, 548 East Jones Street, property owner and applicant Stephanie Diatri. All right, please introduce yourself, you and anyone else who will be presenting.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Daughtry. I own 548 East Jones Street. This is Mackenzie Sider, my partner. And
All right.
yeah, this is our application.
Okay. You please raise your right hand, and if you both of you, okay, great. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, thank you.
All right. At this time, I'll recognize staff for their presentation.
All right, so as you mentioned, this is case COA 103-2023 for 548 East Jones Street, which is in the Oakwood Historic District. You can see here it is in the long stretch of the 500 block on Jones Street. The request is to stain the front porch ceiling, which we realized when we did our staff visit that it has occurred. So the condition I suggested is now irrelevant. This is a view from East Jones Street. And again, from East Jones. This is the porch ceiling detail. And again. So our section in the staff report is called Staff Concerns. You can take that as a concern or as a discussion point. I really enjoyed writing the staff report. I look forward to your conversation on this. So painting a house, changing colors is typically a minor work approvable item. For this particular application, it was unclear to us whether staining a porch ceiling is something that meets the guidelines. I noted in the staff report that there are two design guidelines, 2.1.9 and 2.4.6, that it states, and I can read it for you. It is not appropriate to strip historically painted surfaces down to bare wood and apply clear stains or finishes to create a natural wood appearance. I did some research. There is information that suggests that some beadboard porch ceilings were historically varnished or painted with tinted shellacs, or were painted in a wood color. There are references in preservation briefs by the National Park Service that suggest that stain is a viable and a historically appropriate ceiling treatment. And the applicants did provide a number of examples that exist in the neighborhood. I provided a list in the staff report looking into the history of each of those. In some instances, the existing stained porch ceiling was approved through the COA process. All of them occurred through significantly earlier iterations of the design guidelines, so they did not have the existing, the two potentially problematic guidelines to contend with. So I think we're asking you for an interpretation for the application as well as maybe some guidance on the guidelines themselves. And I look forward to your discussion.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'll recognize the applicant for any presentation they'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Good to see you. I'll try to keep it brief. I know you probably want to have a little discussion on this. Our apologies for having it actually stained. I want to give a little background on that just so you have some context. We have recently painted our house, and we knew that we needed to get approval to paint the house. Obviously, you do not need to get approval to replace certain articles of wood if needed on a porch itself. And so the front of our porch was essentially sinking in, and there were major rotted areas. And so we had to replace the front porch so that no one would get injured, especially the male guy or whoever else was coming to the front porch. So we hired Fern and Mel. I'm sure most people probably know that. They do a lot in Oakwood and a lot of the historic areas to replace the boards, replace the front porch itself. And when they were doing that, the ceiling was also not in great condition. There, you can probably tell from some of the earlier photos, there are major, holes, slats, and some of that was getting near the electrical as well. And so we actually, one of the concerns that the staff had, I certainly can appreciate that you don't want to strip the wood because that does create some concerns. We actually had to replace all of the wood because the wood was rotted and not in very good condition. And so when we replaced the porch floor with brand new wood, we did the same at the top, and then they sort of asked us to make a quick decision. What are you going to paint it or are you going to stain it? We walk around Oakwood all of the time and see numerous stained porch ceilings. And we looked at one of the applications for the house specifically across the street from us, 547 East Jones Street, where they had requested a stain/paint, and it was approved. I don't think the stain itself was per se approved, but the application got approved and it was stained. And so we had a little bit of confusion ourselves as to whether or not we could do it, but we felt like, given also that porch doors may be stained as a minor work approval, and I'll let the staff confirm that, one could very easily submit a minor work approval to stain their front porch door, which obviously you can see from the street. The ceiling itself, you don't always see the ceiling, but you certainly see the door. So what would be the difference between a door stain versus a ceiling stain that would be a lot less obvious? I think there's a lot of confusion there. And so one reason why I think several people probably indicated they were going to stain, or they said they were painting and then they ended up staining and they didn't go through this process. Mackenzie and I very much respect the Historic Commission. We appreciate that we want to take care of the house, and we respect the process and why we're here. And one reason why we specifically are making this ask is because we would like for you all to consider changing it to a minor work approval so that the staff can approve a stain as opposed to making it a major work approval, given, one, that it's ubiquitous throughout Oakwood and many other historic areas, and two, when stained porch doors do not require major work approval. So it would seem slightly, I don't want to use the legal term arbitrary and capricious, but it would seem a little inconsistent or incongruent to approve one but not approve the other being a lot less obvious. And so, for something that may seem kind of insignificant, I'm asking that you all consider it in a significant way to make it effective for everyone in the neighborhood to be able to comply, so they're not essentially trying to lie on applications just so they can ultimately do the thing they want to do, which is stain their porch ceiling. I think it's quite clear that many people do have that as a preference that may or may not be historic. I think, as the staff very aptly pointed out, there certainly is some history to staining porch ceilings. There's also some history to having it painted blue. But I think painting versus staining, there is history for both, and there is a very clear preservation tactic with staining because you can see the wood, and it's a lot I don't know, prettier would be the wrong word, but you can actually, you see the character of the house or of the ceiling versus it being, painted some dull color or a bright color that presumably could get approved. It would be just very incongruous from my perspective to not allow it to be a minor work approval. So I'm happy to answer any further questions. I also think it protects the wood in a lot of other ways. We chose a stain that would, again, we began doing it. I think we originally submitted this to say that it was not retroactive, that it would be prospective. Unfortunately, we'd begun it, but we hadn't completed it. So we selected the one that said it would be prospective, but then they ended up completing it. So I think we sent an email that said, hey, it actually was completed, so it is now retroactive. So apologies for the confusion on that. But our confusion was really based in seeing many other applications that appear to be approved with stained porch ceilings. And we gave you a sampling. I can promise you there are at least another 10 or so houses in the neighborhood that we just didn't continue walking to that have that same thing. In fact, you all saw one today. You just approved the fence on Person Street, and they have a stained porch ceiling. So again, I'd ask not just that you approve our specific request, but also that you give consideration to whether this can be a minor work approval so that others in the neighborhood tend more to comply than to not comply. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Ken, did I leave anything out? Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Other members of the public who wish to speak in support of the application? Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Anyone with questions or comments on the application? Hearing none, we'll proceed with commissioner questions of the applicant.
I believe I heard from you that the historic ceiling was substantially deteriorated and therefore replaced, in essence. We're not looking at historic material on the ceiling, correct?
That is correct. It was rotting, basically.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm noting is that the stain in question, the one you used, was Cabot Chestnut Brown, semi-transparent, therefore not clear, correct?
Not entirely clear. There is a paint component to it. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? John? Jordan? No. Rob? All right, we'll close the evidentiary hearing and proceed with committee discussion. You can have a seat. Thank you very much.
Curtis, I think your question was the kingpin question that gives us actually somewhat of a way to kind of handle this in the future.
Yes.
And what you asked him was, it's not a clear stain, or not a clear, it's not clear.
Correct.
It's a color.
And one of the things we note in the guidelines is it says it's not appropriate to apply clear stains or finishes that create a natural wood appearance.
Yes.
That is not a natural wood
That
appearance.
is not a natural wood. And second point, when this came up, my biggest question, because I did not know it was almost an after effect thing. I thought you still had the old porch, and my first question was, have you seen your porch floor? I said, you got more problems than just your color of your ceiling here. And so when they just said that it was replaced, this is a new material.
Mm-hmm.
And it is of this time, and it is a color, and I think it could be considered a minor work on that front.
Mm-hmm.
I respectfully disagree.
Okay, go ahead, knock yourself out.
I mean, I feel like the tinting of the stain is not embellishing it on a level that's equitable to painting. It's just, I don't agree with that. I also think linking doors and ceilings, they're different architectural features.
I didn't go into that.
And if I was to take into consideration the proposed change to major and minor work, I would suggest that maybe we consider doors as a major work, not taking ceilings to minor work. I don't think that should be the burden of staff, but I'm only responding to part of the hearing. And then I guess finally it would have been great to even just see some pile of the material that was replaced, because we frequently hear that on older properties, material is deteriorated beyond repair, but there was no evidence of that. There's photos of a ceiling with several coats of paint,
Mm-hmm.
and then I believe the presentation may have had a replaced ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a gap as far as evidence goes that I can tell. So I would have loved to have had that evidence. It would have made me feel a lot better about the replacement.
Did you look at the pictures on that
I did.
roof, on that porch?
I did.
Well, you can see that seams are open and things like that in the pictures, but it really doesn't. It could just have been a crappy paint job, frankly.
Mhm.
From the,
It could be scraped and painted, and
Right.
also as you start above it, right? The roof is, you want to stop water from infiltrating, but you can repair just about anything, John.
Okay.
With wood.
All right.
Yeah.
I think I'm with Rob on this one. Like, maybe I can get there with you for it not being a clear stain. It's technically not being technically correct. Some people say is the best way to be correct. But I think like 2.1.5 talks about consider comparable substitute materials only if using the original material is not technically feasible. I think it's technically feasible to have painted that beadboard that they put in to a color instead of staining it. We are sort of bumping up against the people say they're going to do one thing in the hearing and then do something else later. There's not really a way for us to govern that. I don't even know if we can address that in a meaningful way.
It would be a COA violation.
Which
if-
it already is.
Said one thing and did something different, yeah.
Sure, and so the fact that that exists in Oakwood doesn't really affect what we've got going on here.
I think something that we've got, though, which is in the testimony, we had facts that ceilings were historically stained. So this was really not something necessarily out of character.
Did we have facts of that? We had.
It's staff offered
Yeah.
that fact.
Staff, yeah.
I mean, but again, respectfully, it was anecdotally mentioned from Colette that those were were earlier versions of the guidelines, I believe.
Actually,
And there wasn't really, there's not really evidence of like ones that were historically stained versus those, there was not sort of comparative analysis of those that were historically stained.
Actually, she, in the staff report, it says National Park Service Preservation Brief on preserving historic wood porches suggests that both paint and stain are viable sealing treatments. Nearly all cases, this means the material should be painted or, when historically appropriate, stained with some porch ceilings. So there actually is a fact from outside our world that's in evidence.
What are we supposed to determine
Very
whether
general.
it's...
I'm sorry. That's not
it may be general, but it's there.
Are we supposed to determine whether
Still
it's
evidence.
historically appropriate?
Yes, we are, but I mean, we have not had testimony to the contrary.
That it's historically inappropriate.
Right.
Correct.
And that's,
And there,
That's kind of
there
where
are
we are.
porches all over Oakwood, as they have shown,
yeah,
that we, as a board, have approved.
yes.
And why do we change our mind now?
Right.
Were those case numbers listed?
No.
So where you?
Yes.
Yes.
They are.
Okay.
They are. 98, 09, 15, 94, 07, 04, 14.
Yeah, so over the years, many years.
Many years.
And as far as the question of staff,
The second number is.
staff approval or not, that's something we can't do here, right? That's actually a
Correct.
change to the statute. But
Oh, okay.
I think it's reasonable to throw out there that this should be, I think this is reasonable to ask that this be a discussion when we're looking at any updates to guidelines, because paint is a staff approval item. Staining would be a staff approval item. Removal of a current finish and restoration should not necessarily be a staff item.
Yes,
Yeah.
that I agree with. That I agree with. And I also, I have a little, I'm going to come back with Rob on this in a little bit in terms of when residents in historic neighborhoods have a contractor that comes by and says, you need to replace your roof or your porch
Right.
ceiling, don't just go with what they say.
Right.
There needs to be some checking up on this in terms of what is appropriate based on the neighborhood you're in.
Absolutely.
And it is not necessarily a repair when you rip out all the material that could have been reused.
Right.
And that would have at least brought this discussion up so that we could then kind of guide it in a different way rather than having to come back after the fact and say, excuse us, you need to go back and get all the wood that you took out of that porch ceiling and put it back. That's impossible now.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible.
So, I mean, based on no evidence to the contrary, evidence that ceilings were historically stained, evidence that the stain in question is tinted, and the actual verbiage of the guidelines, and that the ceiling was substantially deteriorated and therefore replaced. These are the facts we've been given. I think it's incumbent on us to approve this.
I agree.
I agree.
I think like for like would have been replacing it with a painted ceiling because it was a painted ceiling. So
Hence the COA.
if you're going to replace the ceiling
Yeah.
with a ceiling that's, I think the strictest reading of the guidelines would require a painted ceiling.
And like for like would have mooted the need for a COA too. It would have been a repair.
Yeah, I don't even believe it's the same profile of wood.
No, it's not. It's not even, it's not, because the original ceiling was not beaded board.
So, what are we going to do?
I'm happy to vote on a motion.
Yeah, let's do a motion. You want me to make a motion?
I want you to make a motion.
Okay.
Wants to, I think you're predicting your vote.
I've got something for you guys, by the way, to help with this. I move that based upon the application and the facts presented during the hearing, we approve the application, and with no conditions, actually.
Motion's been made to approve the application. Is there a second?
It's a second in the discussion, so if we're going to discuss, let's do a second and go on.
Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second.
Okay.
Here's why I didn't do it. Jordan makes a good point. I mean, it's almost like I want to compromise here.
I'm happy to. It's tricky.
Well, it's either approve or
Yeah.
deny because there's
Right.
no conditions we can make.
Right. It's
been
post
done.
facto.
Yes.
So well, I
Can't
guess,
deny it because it's been
Well,
done.
can we
You can
put a
invent
condition?
any conditions you want, just because we did not
Yeah,
template.
right. Why can't
You're
we put a
welcome
condition
to
on it?
create at will.
Yeah, it's after the fact. We have to look at it as if it has never happened.
I mean, if we deny it, it's not.
What happens?
There's no actionable item, but it would set precedent going forward. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if we say you have a painted ceiling, when you do a new ceiling, if you do a new ceiling, it has to be painted. Thus, this application is
Well,
denied.
what if the applicant doesn't want to paint it and they come before us to do a COA to do something different, which is
Then-
what the applicant is doing?
But they've already. We would review the case just like we are, except the difference would be they wouldn't have already done it. So we could.
Even though there's evidence that's been presented that stained ceilings exist in Oakwood and have been approved by this committee?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, let me just make this comment, if I hope it's helpful. If there is any opposition evidence, and the evidence you have consists of the applicant's testimony together with the staff report, if you find that there is some opposition evidence, then the commission is allowed to balance what in the record, evidence in the record that seems to support granting the application, what evidence there is that would seem to deny the application. If there is no evidence in opposition, you accept the evidence that has been received. There must be some opposition evidence in order for the committee to be able to go through that balancing process. If you don't think that's the case, then the issue is, has the applicant presented, or is there prima facie evidence sufficient to make the case? If you accept it as true, as qualified and true, and then the applicant's entitled to have the application granted. So that's just the point, to look at the evidence. If there's some opposition evidence, then the committee can balance pro and con. Otherwise, if there's no opposition evidence, I think y'all have had training on that point.
Yeah, Curtis, you made a similar point earlier. The only evidence that has been presented to the committee is the staff report and then the evidence from the applicant. There has been no evidence in opposition presented to the committee. So based on what has been presented to the committee, we can't weigh evidence in support and evidence against, because the only evidence that was presented to us was the staff report and evidence from the applicant, which was obviously in support of the application. As Raz said, we could decide that the evidence that was presented fails to meet the prima facie case that that the evidence presented just failed to meet congruity. That is an option. But based on the evidence that was presented to the committee from the staff report, which lists prior approvals of this committee, and based on the evidence that the applicant presented to us, this is my opinion now speaking, a denial would be opening up to reversal.
Mm-hmm. I think we'd need compelling evidence to deny, wouldn't we?
Well, let's dig into that a little bit.
I also have some stuff too. Go ahead. Yeah, you go.
So, I think the listed COAs from staff in the staff report are evidence, right? But I don't necessarily think that they're all supporting evidence. I mean, half of the applications or the evidence or half of the examples provided actually say that in their COA they specified paint, but later it appears that they were stained. So,
Jordan, there's also, I'm sorry to jump in, but item number 2, right above those examples, does say, from the congruity analysis, the vast majority of porch ceilings in this district are painted. So as far as having evidence, 7 COAs does not constitute a vast majority, especially, for the guideline sections 2.1.7 and 2.1.9. I'm really struggling with, it's not appropriate to strip historically painted surfaces down to bare wood and apply clear stains, which is what the application was for.
And
I'd also like to, go ahead.
Fully half of the 14 examples actually submitted as paint.
Mm-hmm.
And then later
They're violations, yeah.
were stained. So
Is that, we know that?
it's right.
That's what its staff says.
It's in the notes.
Okay, that's important to know. But I wanted to say that, I heard earlier Wes was saying there's not evidence to support or contradictory evidence to not do this, or something to that effect. And what I wanted to say was that the pictures themselves of the existing that we have in our packet show that to be a painted ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is more clear in evidence than that.
But
It was painted.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's conflicting, there's the support would be that the other pictures, that many of the other houses are stained, but I guess the opposing evidence is that the house in question, the case in front of us was painted.
Right, and see, and going back to that point again, if we're looking at it on a case-by-case basis, which is where these other issues came up in terms of using it as precedent, this is a case-by-case basis where it is clear in those photographs that was a painted ceiling, and the profile of that ceiling is different than the ceiling that's in there now.
And let me come back at that with, it's a change, right? It's a COA for a change, in essence. And if it was an addition, a deck, those are all changes to a historic structure.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the fact that it was painted should stop us from approving something that's congruous for the guidelines otherwise. Because that,
where I'm
we're not
going
here to stop change, right?
Right. Now, where I'm going with that is, does that give us basis for saying, as a way to resolve this issue, it is a new ceiling, but you need to go back and paint it now? You need to paint over the stain.
I would say that because the evidence we have before us is that, yes, the majority of the ceilings were painted, but that we also have evidence that at least 7 out of 14 that were submitted were approved stained.
Okay.
We have evidence that there's a variety of treatments.
Well, and I also want to refer back to in the COA case that we had for the addition for the accessory dwelling unit in Oakwood. It had, and we approved, because I was here for that, we approved it to have a stained ceiling in that porch.
And looking at I'm looking at the staff report. This is the last one, 504 East Jones, 10514 COA, approved natural stain specified for front porch. That's not an example where someone said they were going to paint and then they ended up staining. The one above it, 514 East Jones Street, 17004 COA, approved by this committee, clear stain specified for porch ceiling. Again, not an example where someone said they were going to paint and then they stained after the fact.
Keep going.
I mean,
read all of them. Don't just pick the 2 that are,
Well, I mean, as you stated earlier, and as you put on the record, there are examples where people said they were going to paint and then they stained. But this committee has also been presented with stained, and that's what they did, and that's what this committee approved, and that's what they did.
I think, Wes, if I could just add, both of those cases were new construction, which I feel is somewhat different as far as setting precedent and allowing a change.
I agree with that.
As I look at the application more and more and hear our discussion, I mean, I'm struggling more with the profile change, or almost struggling with the profile change as much as the stain versus paint.
Yeah. I agree.
I think that our guidelines are clear, right? The majority of the porch ceilings are painted, most to a light medium value. The National Park Service report is sort of in the orbit of our guidelines, but not part of our, it's like supplementary material that maybe we should consider. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that, but like the Raleigh Historic Development Commission design guidelines are clear about what should have been done here. The National Park Service is like it's nice to think about.
Okay, then.
And our guidelines are just that, guidelines.
Right. And it doesn't answer or respond to how we got to where we are on this, because we have approved it before.
Right.
So, again, why this, why now? I mean, we can get all high and mighty about it, and say the guidelines say this, but we've ignored them before.
Well, because
I mean, if you want to get letter to letter.
Because they're guidelines and we're looking for congruity, not matchy-matchy, right? And the question is overall the situation still congruous, right?
Well, it's given the amount that we've approved, it's become congruous.
Right.
Maybe.
That's where my head's at.
Well, how is it different? How is it not?
I mean, I guess like a full inventory of the stained versus painted,
That's, yeah.
that would be, I guess, one remedy to this, right? If we did a survey of all the porches in Oakwood and found how many of them were painted versus stained, I mean, and then we decide on balance, like what they are, it's maybe outside the scope of this. But
And
I'm with you, and we have already approved it. Seems something to
if we
not
look at the guidelines, like I guess the one that is most direct is the 2.1.5, not appropriate to strip historically painted surfaces down to bare wood and apply clear stains or finishes to create the natural wood appearance. If I go through and try and parse that, this is not that, right?
Right.
They replaced the ceiling.
Right. It's new material.
It's new material. And knowing that we want to differentiate new from old, this is getting into the, am I trying to find a way to approve something that shouldn't be approved? But it's a change in many ways. It's a change in color. It's a change in profile.
Well, but here's the caveat in that, it's not a change of material.
Right. Exactly. It is the appropriate historic material. The widths even on it are similar to the widths that were on from the photos on the porch.
Yeah, I mean, it's different had they gone up there and put in vinyl siding on the
It's not the same material, though. It's beaded, and what was there was V'd at one point. I mean, or
well, no, it was wood. It was wood planks versus
a panel
that looks like it's beaded.
Right.
Yeah, correct. But again, it's wood. It's not plastic.
Right.
That's where I'm going with it.
So
I'm trying to.
I understand.
Get us to zero here
I
somewhere.
appreciate it. Yeah, I mean,
And I think there's a really appropriate time to vote on a case and have a mixed outcome here. And I know the way I'm
We
going to
don't always have to be unanimous.
Right.
I was ready to hear a motion like 15 minutes for the record, because I knew
A motion was made.
I knew we would get here.
So the motion was made and failed, so why don't we try another motion?
you could make the same motion and see if it carries.
Right.
Rob, why don't you make the motion?
I move that the application be approved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, motion fails.
What happens?
You can go for another motion. because the next
Until
thing's going to be a
something happens.
denial.
I mean,
Or an approval.
I can't just go through. I mean, I'm with you guys in some of this because I mean, I want to do it, but I want us to understand where this is going to take us in the future. Because I mean, what they're asking for at staff is very much about let's figure this out.
The way you resolve that is by adding facts to make it very clear that your decision applies to only this situation, such as the ceiling has been replaced. It is new wood. It is not sanding or removing the paint from a historic ceiling.
I'd be glad to do that,
And I
but
did
it's a
actually-
change. It's such a change in profile that I would say I wouldn't approve it if they brought it for if they were to bring that to us as a
But that
potential.
isn't the question here. It's the paint. It's the stain.
Yeah,
The
technically.
application is not for a change in profile.
Yeah, it was wood before, it's wood now.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody just recited a portion of their house with a different profile,
We'd be at.
The nature
we'd
of the
have a cow.
request was not advertised to include a change in the profile to the ceiling of the porch.
but that work was done, so
Well,
we
but
should
it was done. It was still done, just not reported. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
they're
Well, you
telling
can't
us.
handle that today, right now.
It's the same.
Well, does that mean that now that it's known that and it's been reported and it's been outside of the guidelines that they're going to have to come back again and an after the fact thing for the profile?
Possibly, we'll discuss it.
Okay.
I mean, the other option is we approve it with conditions, and the condition is that, since we have to treat it as if it's never happened, and the condition is that it is planked boards painted. But I don't see that we have the evidence to do that before.
We don't.
They have to be. I would think that we have to deny it, and then they will have to come back and reapply based on the knowledge that they have now publicly told us that they've done something that has not been approved through the COA process.
I think we'd find ourselves on appeal, and this is speculation, but thinking like the Asheville case that were your schooled on earlier, a couple years ago, where there was no contrary evidence other than that came from the commission. It
I
got
was
overturned.
the law clerk who drafted that opinion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But there is evidence to that because of the pictures that they present in the application, because the original ceiling is there.
Tanya
We see
Tully
that.
here. There is no guarantee that the COA that they filed to replace the wood would be a major work. You may never see it. It could be approved as a minor work. I'm not saying we don't have it before us to do review, but you need to make your decision based on what is here today without any speculation.
Then I'm fine staying or denying it. I mean, I just think that if we were to approve this, we're setting ourselves up for.
We've already done it.
Yeah, let's talk through specific conditions for this case so that we don't bind ourselves to this one.
Well, and what I did, prior to my motion, I did offer the additional facts, or acknowledge the facts that the ceilings were historically stained, that the stain in question was tinted and the ceiling was substantially deteriorated and therefore replaced. Those are specific to this case and the condition we're in. So we have that it's not historic wood.
I mean, can we put into evidence that
No.
the ceiling was replaced? We can't.
It's got to come from staff or somebody on the other side of the table.
Mr. Chairman, in preparing the findings, it's certainly appropriate to indicate if certain findings were pivotal in your determination. If you're concerned about distinguishing this decision and limiting it to particular facts of this case, that of course can be that can be addressed and memorialized in the findings for this case.
And we do have on record that there was a profile change in the wood replacement, too.
That's what I'm saying,
So
yeah.
that's part of the
Right.
situation.
Right, that's part of the finding.
Yeah.
They told us they replaced it, so that's.
Well, and it's evident from the photograph.
Yeah. So we've got that all in there already.
Yeah, see, I'm still confused as to why we can't bring that up as part of this process.
Actually, we could reopen the hearing, ask staff if the profile had changed on the ceiling, and get an answer, and that would be admissible as a fact, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Do we need a
Why
motion
don't we
to do
open the
that?
hearing?
Yeah, no, I could just do that.
Okay.
Evidentiary hearing is reopened. For a question to staff.
Has the profile of the wood used in the ceiling changed from the historic material?
I mean, it's really tough to say from a grainy photo that is covered in layers of paint. It's possible.
So it's uncertain.
I mean, I didn't see it in person, so it would be speculation based on a photograph.
Okay.
Could we ask, maybe you already said it and I missed it, but what elevated this from a minor work to
Yeah,
a
good
COA?
question.
Like, how did we actually get here?
The applicant submitted a minor work to change the paint colors and said that they would like to stain their ceiling. We looked at the guidelines, and the guidelines said that you shouldn't strip paint and stain wood. Thus, we said, if you would like to have a stained ceiling, it should be a major work. And it was submitted, but that work occurred after that fact.
So in receiving.
We're operating under the impression that the historic wood porch ceiling would be scraped or the paint removed and then stained. We were not under the impression that wood would be replaced
And why would that put that into a major work?
because it was not clearly evident based on the guidelines that the current guidelines that stripping paint from historic wood and staining it meets the guidelines.
It required an interpretation of the guidelines. Tanya Tully.
We are not allowed to make interpretations as staff.
I'm being dense here, I swear. It says in the guidelines that stripping and doing that is a no-no.
Staff are not allowed to deny COAs.
Yeah, it's inherently.
If it is a minor work that we cannot approve, it becomes a major work that you review.
Yeah, that's why we get some stuff that we do. And
Well, we don't, so now we don't have evidence from staff to add into the
no,
findings.
That was inconclusive.
It's inconclusive.
Is replacing the ceiling hypothetically a minor work?
Hypothetically, replacing porch ceiling in kind is routine maintenance and not an application at all.
so they could have replaced it with new wood, painted it the current color, and there would have been no application necessary.
Or that would have just been a minor work, right?
No, it would have been nothing.
application.
Oh, yeah.
It's maintenance.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
We'll close the evidentiary hearing, resume with committee discussion.
Well, we don't have the findings now.
Well, we've had two failed motions to approve. Do we want to try a motion to deny? Or approve with conditions?
I don't know. I mean, we can approve or deny. What does it mean?
Well, if it's approved with conditions and it doesn't meet the conditions, it's a violation of the COA that's been approved if it remains the way it is. And it would go to enforcement or likely appeal. And enforcement could theoretically force the replacement of the ceiling with a different material and paint, which seems pretty extreme.
I would like to remind you that the applicants are present and available for questions if you would like to speak to them.
Well, the only question I would have for them is, do you want to rip out your ceiling and do it again?
I know the
I know what that answer is going to be.
Help us.
Chairman, let me add this. If no motion is made and carried, there was a motion to approve and it failed. So no action is tantamount to a denial in this case. There exists a condition that staff has indicated requires a certificate, and there has not been action that directs the issuance of a certificate. So that's the practical effect, and then it just simply does become either an appeal question or an enforcement question for the city of Raleigh to address.
Raz, I've got another question. If there is no action or whatever, and it basically is denied, does that not give the applicant the opportunity to reapply and say this is a change of use, or, to add in the fact that, to say that we replaced the ceiling with this new material and provide evidence as to why it was done and add all that other stuff in beyond the stain color?
And another way to get there would be to offer the opportunity to continue the application for further evidence. But,
Yeah.
and we can only speculate what that could be.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, like, what are we doing?
Right.
Like, really, what are we doing?
I know.
This evidence has been presented that this feature exists in Oakwood. It has been approved by this committee, and we are spinning circles. And I was like, what are we doing?
I mean, Wes, respectfully, I think you're kind of trivializing our responsibility. I understand your tenor, but I feel like, some of the prior approvals were new construction. That just is a different, and they were different cases, and different evidence was presented with them.
How do we get to a yes? Whether on this or as a different application? Obviously, the easiest yes is it's a repair and it goes back.
I think I would come around if I had some level of evidence that the deteriorated, porch ceiling needed replacement, that it was coming apart. Because there is a change to the profile. I think we'd be a little more open to that. And I know that, I felt that there was some negative energy when Jordan was suggesting a survey, but we have similar surveys all the time within a district or within, a reasonable boundary area comparing, like changes. And I think that would give me some comfort.
Well, okay, but the evidence, the survey stuff, there was a lot in there already. Enough to where if they were to go through and they collected all of it and then brought it back, to me, there's enough in there to say, all right, okay.
Okay.
There's no need for a survey. There's enough in there right
Sure,
now
okay.
to convince me. I don't know why that would change my mind. And to your previous point, the profile issue is not this case. And so for that to enter this case, we have to basically say no to something that we want to hear about later, I guess.
And we don't have an evidence that there's a change in profile.
Right.
And of the,
Says who?
And the only way evidence could be brought forward would be for that contractor who sold them on this idea to take that porch ceiling down, to verify and confirm, just like an arborist would come in and say the tree is dead. It would have to be the contractor's evidence of saying that the ceiling porch was rotted to the point where it couldn't be reused.
And I think looking at the photographs, we're seeing open seams and things that would be congruous with water damage of the roof.
And that could be presented, but again, all that stuff is not this case.
Right.
And I'll note, as in the staff report, of the 14 existing photographs that were presented, 7 were approved through the COA process, and 3 of them were new construction, but that means 4 of them weren't.
So, I mean, I'm okay with denying this only so that we can get to the root of the issue, which is the profile change. Because again, if it's a scenario of are we inadvertently approving the profile change by saying yes to the color?
Mm-hmm.
It's a question, and a real one, and a fair one.
I would like to clarify that apparently my chart was not very clear. The new construction isn't entirely new construction. Only 514 East Jones is a structure that was constructed in 2004. 504 East Jones and the other one are porch reconstructions. So the porch is new, the house is not. But that said, again, the applicants are present to answer any questions, and perhaps you should consider deferring to ask for additional information to be presented later instead of potentially denying.
After speaking with the applicants, if it is deferred, there's also an opportunity to expand the work request involved because we will renotice it at the property. But you should speak with the applicants about what they're interested in or able to provide to you.
Wes, can we bring it back up?
Yes. We'll reopen the evidentiary hearing to ask the applicants additional questions. Any questions from the committee?
Do you have evidence of the deteriorated material or any photographs of it once it was removed?
I do not have any photographs of after the wood was taken down. The photo that you have in front of you clearly shows a line, multiple lines where the seams were separating.
Mm-hmm.
There was water damage above. In fact, actually, may I have 1 minute? Actually, I need to use my phone because I might have one.
Okay. And it was, I meant that as a yes or no question. Yes. If you do have it, then that could help us.
It's not that you need to show us now.
And Stephanie, I would ask you to describe the damage of the wood.
Can I clarify, are you asking whether the wood was deteriorated and replaced or whether when it was replaced, the profile changed?
Well, that was going to be my next question, is if there's documentation of the profile, which, if a material was removed, we might be able to see, get a better idea of the cross-section.
Well, I hate to keep bringing this up, but that's not this case. I think what we have to ask is, would you be, as the applicant, would you be amenable to providing additional evidence to answer some of the questions that we have that are not part of this case right now, but are very related to this case in terms of us being able to come to a clear decision to approve it? Meaning, and I guess I can make a suggestion, bringing your contractor in and having him, through an affidavit or some kind of testimony, say that wood was rotted and it needed to be replaced. That to me would be evidence to then say we now have a new ceiling, and you will add that to your application, and then we say it's okay now because you've gone through the hoops to make this all happen. We've now documented the fact that the profile has changed based on the evidence, based on the testimony, and then the color thing is less of an issue because we've said yes to that in the past. By us saying yes to the color right now, we're also saying yes to the profile change.
Tanya Tully, no. If you say yes to the paint or stain, you are not saying anything about the profile.
Okay.
We have heard today that there may be a profile change. Staff has heard it. Staff is now obligated to investigate and make a determination whether or not a new COA needs to be filed.
That's what I needed to hear.
That is staff's job. That is not your job.
Thank you. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. I have no more questions. I'm good. I can vote now.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is what went up beadboard or boards with rounded corners? Beadboard would have a run of like a little bump and then a flat, and then a bump and a
I
flat.
believe they were rounded corners.
I
They were
think-
beadboard.
Beadboard?
And what was currently there was not.
If you're going to speak, please come up to the mic because it's recorded.
Yeah.
What was currently there was not historic. So we've been told it was not tongue and groove. So putting that back up is not great for water penetration. So our contractor, with keeping with the wear and tear of our porch, recommended we put tongue and groove in, which is all over our neighborhood.
Right.
And has been approved, and that is a product that is installed everywhere. So what was there before was not gonna, I don't even know if they would be able to put it back up. It wasn't historic.
Right.
There were also soft spots in various places, again, near the electrical equipment. And so from my perspective, I don't want the house to burn down, which would certainly not be congruous with
Right.
what we're trying to do here. And so we removed the wood that was, again, according to what we believe, not actually historic, but someone just tacked up a bunch of pine, or I don't know if
Like
it was
2x4.
pine.
I mean, it was not, you can kind of see it in the photos.
And
but
there
it was
were
not historic.
nails, I mean, they just kind of tacked it up there. And so when we replaced the ceiling as well as the floor, we did tongue and groove to be very consistent with the rest of the neighborhood to prevent additional water damage and to preserve the character of the house. And, forgive any frustration on our part. It's not, we respect this process, and that's actually why we're here. And, Rob, I want to address something that you mentioned specifically and the concern that you had. I understand that it's been done, and Jordan, to your point as well, I understand that it's been done and you can't really undo it. It wasn't done because we were trying to spite the commission. We're actually here intentionally trying to be the people in Oakwood that do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people that are not doing the right thing. And so we're trying to preserve the house. This house was falling apart. When you all, I don't know if you all have had a chance to go by our house, but when you look at ours and you look to the property next door, it is falling apart. There's a tenant in that property, and there's a very incongruous apartment building next door that has all sorts of potential violations. We are trying to make our neighborhood look good and look historic. And when you look around at some of these beautiful homes, many of them that are historic, many of them do have the stained ceiling that look almost identical to what we've presented. And I actually said to Mackenzie, I think we should take more photographs before we come to the hearing, and I apologize that we did not. But there's a sampling of at least another 10, 15, 20 homes that would be very characteristic with this. They're not skinny boards. The boards that were there, if you zoom in, are approximately this. I think these might be, just because they're the tongue and groove, I think they might be maybe a quarter of an inch smaller than the boards that were there before. So it's not like we've changed to the profile question, the entire profile of the porch ceiling. It was we tried to keep it as consistent as possible, while also making a repair that ultimately I was fearful would result in an electrical problem and or potentially a significant roof damage. So I
We
hope
weren't
that.
trying to be cheap in doing this. Like,
Oh,
we
yeah,
spent a
no.
lot of money
Oh, yeah.
putting this,
Evident.
Well,
I don't think that we weren't accusing you of that.
sometimes people just take stuff down
Yeah.
and put something they want back up, and we
Yeah.
really did it just to be congruous with the neighborhood.
I've got a quick question for staff. While you're still up there, could you zoom weigh in on that ceiling or on the application page 6 on the new ceiling? It's page 6. It's the right-hand photograph. And it shows what went up. The page 6 right-hand photograph, that's not page 6. And I want the right-hand photograph because there's a period.
Are you talking about their application?
Their application, it's this photograph we
I
want to
think
look
this
at.
is from the staff report, right? No?
Is that beadboard? That's not beadboard.
I don't know that it is. It's tongue
No,
and
no, no,
groove
it's
board.
tongue and groove board.
It's tongue and groove.
Yeah.
It's straight tongue groove, flat boards
Yeah, sorry, not,
Yeah.
with east corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said it's not beadboard.
But
Right.
it's not rounded corner. Or,
Right.
yes.
Right.
It's an east corner.
It's a tongue and groove pine.
It's a tongue and, yeah. Well, a tongue and groove bead, because it's, the width is, it's got a bead down the center.
No, it doesn't. Doesn't have.
Yeah, it does.
It's a V groove tongue and
Yeah.
groove.
Yeah. So I just want to
Yeah, I mean,
get that there because it's not really that great a profile change even.
correct. And so I think where I'm at, and I think Tanya answered my question beautifully. My issue has always been, are we saying okay to something that we didn't get a chance to approve by saying yes to the color because the other thing would just kind of flow right into it? Tanya has let me know, by us approving the color, it does not, staff now is aware of it, and we will maybe hear this case again, if not through staff, through a minor work of the change, but back to us. That gives me solace, because at least I understand that the process by which this goes through, someone out there is not going to go and start ripping their ceiling down and putting up all kinds of stuff and then say, well, if I just ask him, if I paint it the same color and I won't have to worry about it, I want everybody to worry about it.
Shall we try another motion?
Yeah, it sounds like
Should you make your motion again?
Sounds like it might pass this
If there's
time.
any other further discussion from the committee after closing the evidentiary hearing?
I move that the application be approved based on the evidence and the testimony.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 3-2. Congratulations. I'm sorry it took this long. Your application has been approved. And the decision will be official at next month's meeting after I sign the minutes and the order. Thank you very much.
You got to watch the sausage be made.
I've never seen anything so small create such a butterfly. I mean, a butterfly's wings creates a typhoon in another part of the country. It's amazing.
I take it everything is concluded. May I say one or two more things
Please.
briefly?
Yes.
That's actually why, John, I decided not to do what everybody else did, which was just totally ignore this committee. I came in front of you because I wanted you to look hard at the issue and make a decision so that other people would actually comply. And I would just encourage the commission to consider that, because a lot of people, when it's difficult to comply and when it's a pain in the neck to sit at a meeting for multiple hours, and to put signs in the yard and to go through all that, it's worth it from my perspective to preserve the history of our neighborhood, and that's why we moved into it. But a lot of people take the easy route, and so I took the harder one.
Yes, you did.
We took the harder one.
Well, and you ask us the hard question, and I appreciate that more than you know, because it puts us at task, and I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate you being an example of how it should go, even though it didn't go the way we hoped it would.
And again, our apologies we didn't put it up. Based upon another application that we saw, we thought that this would not be part of a major work approval, and that's why
Right.
they were already in process of doing it, and
Yeah.
that's why we just
Understand.
finished it, because I didn't want to let it sit for a while. So my apologies for finishing it, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next, I'll note that COA 51-2023, 516 North Blunt Street, not being heard. Any committee discussion?
I like to throw something out there. In contrast to what we just went through here. I was attending a social function over the weekend, and a neighbor who, honestly, I didn't recognize and didn't remember, who had a COA before us, made a point of just talking at great length at how wonderful our staff was to work with, specifically Colette. So, yay. So, Want that on record.
Yeah. I want to reiterate that.
You know, and I think Tanya's point about the remove and replace issue not being before you is very well taken, because you all have focused in so many cases when you have after-the-fact applications, you're instructed, according to the law, to hear the application and decide just as though it were a new application. And the applicant can't be penalized. It's not a different forgiveness versus permission kind of a situation. The applicant, in this case, the whole replace and remove issue just happened. It just came at you. And the implications of that are really difficult to sort of square with the process that you all have used to.
Right.
But I think Tanya, you know,
Yeah,
very,
that, like I said, it solved all
was a
angst I
very
had
well,
about voting the way I did.
appropriate
And I appreciate
comment.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Get a gold star.